Hi, my name's Simon Russell. I'm a freelance motion graphic designer. I'm based in the UK, based in a town called Plymouth, which is in Devon. I'm going to talk a little bit about a project I did with Treatment Studio for a classical group called the Kronos Quartet, and the video is kind of a music video called One Earth, One People, One Love. But first I'll play my reel so you can get a gist of what I do. Okay, that's my reel. As you can see, I used to do a lot of live work, a lot of motion graphic-y, particle, sound responsive kind of stuff. So this job, it was done through Treatment Studio, and it was directed by Willie Williams. It was for the Kronos Quartet. The piece was composed by Terry Riley. It was for the anniversary. It was commissioned by NASA for the one anniversary of a Voyager probe. It's got really interesting kind of backstory if you just kind of read the Wikipedia on it, but I won't go into that now. So I'll skip through the piece quickly, and you can watch it on my website, which is simonfarussell.com, if you want to have a look at it, or just it's on YouTube as well, so just Google it, Kronos Quartet, One Earth, One People, One Love. So there's two main sections. There's a globe, which we see forming in this initial bit. A lot of the geo was done in Houdini, but I'm going to show you how to do the same thing really in Cinema 4D. The only bits you couldn't do as easily are these bits which I used the MIDI, which the group supplied, just to sort of time up some of the meteors and just kind of subtle touches really. But the geo was generally done in Houdini, or some of it, and then brought into Cinema 4D for everything else, because Cinema was the kind of backbone of the project and brought everything together. So you've got these globe sections, and there's about 4 different treatments for the globe, and we also scanned the group playing the piece with a Connect camera, which is a depth camera which gives you a point cloud, or you quite easily turn it into a mesh. And so this is the group playing. So it's one seamless shot. Some of the challenges were vast loads of data. So it's just wrangling the data and just getting it to kind of work, and to be able to see it and design it, and to just get a feel for it as you're working for it, rather than working totally blind. I'll just skip through. So that's the group playing. It goes through different globe treatments, different quartet treatments. I keep wanting to say band, quartet. So you've got a teal techie one. You've got a cello solo, metallic, D, and then we dissolve into dust. Very quickly show you the main file, but I used to do it, make myself smaller. So each null, P's contain the planets, Q's contain the quartet sections. I just use takes to skip through and turn on the kind of correct layers. You've got each one here. One of these things, it all had to really be in one project, just because it was one continuous shot, and I didn't want to have to keep jumping around and pasting cameras around and fiddling around too much. It was easy enough just to make it all in one, just use takes and layers, and just be organized. It's yeah. And I'll just jump into, actually, I've just pulled out, say, the first planet into a comp here. So is this planet? Yeah, so here's a planet. The setups are fairly simple in a way. I've just exported a lot of Alembics and then put on poly effects to sort of bring them on and off, some Mo extrudes. I've got these little tags, espresso tags, which say which frames to turn on and off the Alembic, which is just a little sort of helper thing that I made. You can just drop them on, so it just does a comparison of the time and uses a switch to turn them on and off, and that's quite helpful. So you can just drag through and it turn on and off all the Alembics, and it saves doing it all by hand. So that's that really. Actually I'll show you a quartet one as well. So this is a piece of a quartet. The renders, it had to be, I think it was 16,000 frames, I think, and it was rendered with physical render because I couldn't really use a render farm, so I had to. The budget was small and the turnaround was fast, so it just had to be quick. And as you can see, that took like 10 seconds to render. That's long. I think I got it down to like 4 or 5 seconds for each render. So it just had to be quick, basically. Okay, this is kind of work through technique I would use for maybe doing a kind of layered sphere type thing. So I would start off with a sphere, as ever, make it an icosahedron, maybe make it a bit more dense, something like that. So I want to create a few layers and sort of cut them away and add a bit of animation. So quite often what I do, an effect I like, is a poly effects, and that turns each one into a clone essentially. So you see you can pull them down like that. I'll make them each a little bit smaller just so you can sort of see what I'm doing a little bit. And then I'm going to put a plane effector into that. And then I'm going to scale that down to 0. Or sorry, -1. And then my fall off, I'm going to put some noise, so that's a random field. And then just turn that into noise. And then I want to make my scale quite big because I want nice sort of big chunky bits cutting away. And then on my remapping, usually I use a spline or a curve, sorry, and that just sort of gives me nice control. I don't have to play around with sliders too much. So let's cut away quite a lot of it. Obviously you can play with different noise types and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to worry about that for now. Turn off a preview. So that's kind of what I want to do. I want to animate my noise as well, so I'll make my animation speed say 20, something like that. So it just sort of cuts away. Something like that. So I want a few layers as well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put those in a null, Alt-G, paste it, and then just make a slightly bigger sphere like that. And then I want to pull this one back a bit, so I'll just use my remapping again, so you can see the sphere underneath. So I'll just pull it back in the noise, something like that. And maybe I'll make the sphere underneath kind of bigger, just to add a little bit more variation, or less segments, let's say 36, so we've got a kind of multi-layered thing, something like that. It's starting to get a little bit interesting, and maybe I'll just do one more, and so this one will be one right on top, in even denser, so let's maybe try 196, and then let's try a different type of noise, something like displace turbulence, something like that, and the scale smaller. I want just some sort of loose cloudy type things, just as a little sort of overlay. Ooh, just some subtle noise flickering over the top, let's say that. And then obviously you can change the speed, or whatever, let's say that's 5% just to give it subtle. So we're playing at 12 frames a second. It's all right. You can fairly easily preview that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it all out as an Alembic, so I can then bring it back in and preview the whole thing and not worry about playback speeds. So that's cool. That's sort of getting into roughly where I want to be. I'll make a few more. Maybe let's make that 128. Cool. Okay, maybe I want to add a bit of rotation in the spheres, something like that. So as they rotate, obviously the noise field stays the same, and it looks quite interesting. Obviously, I could just keyframe it, but just to show you a different way of doing it, I'm going to put on an espresso tag. Let's pull that in a bit. I drop my sphere in. I want to rotate it on the H. And so I drop that into the H, and then time is going to drive my rotation. So time, there we go, and just pull it across into rotation on the H. And then if I hit play, it's rotating quite fast, so I want to slow it down a bit. I use a math node, and then get my math, set it to, say, multiply. Sometimes it helps just to make these little helper node in Espresso. It's worth knowing Espresso, really. I like it. It can do some nice things. So this is multiplying by about a second input. That input's there. Maybe I'll put it to 0.2. And then let's have a look. Okay, that's just a gentle rotation. Let's make that 0.1. So on the sphere thing here, what I can do, what quite a nice technique is, instead of put absolute reference, so wherever I put that tag, it's going to reference that sphere. If I put relative reference, it will use, the tag will just look to what's underneath it. So what I can do is I could drag that tag to another sphere, open that up, change the speed a little bit, so say 0.06, and then onto my clouds, drag it on there as well, change that to 0.03, and then because it's on relative reference here, it'll always just look at this object it's on. So I hit play, and they're all turning. It just gives a bit of subtle movement. Again, you could keyframe it or do it like that. It's just another way of doing it. So what I'm going to do, that's playing at the frame rate's okay, but obviously if I made it denser, the more layered, the more interesting you make it, the more it's going to slow me down, and I needed speed. I needed to be able to sort of look at what I was doing, so I would export that as an Alembic. So I'm just going to select the bits I want, go File, Export, Alembic, choose where I'm going to put it. So let's call that globe cut call it globe cut 441, and then say I get 100 frames, selection only, and then hit export, and then I can just check that, make a new file, bring it in, make sure scale is set correct, and there's my free spheres. Let's have a look, and then I've got much faster frames per second there. It's just rotating nicely, properly in real time. If I do Shift V, I can look at my HUD, and then I can get frames per second. Also, I like to have camera ticked on as well, so you can just switch between cameras in your HUD. Okay, so that's the first sphere technique. Okay, I've got my my sphere. It's sort of cut away and is looking interesting, so maybe I want to have some sort of building-y protrusions coming out of these empty space bits. So I'll just copy the bottom layer, just duplicate it up. Just for the tutorial, I'll delete all the others because we've already exported it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to group my sphere, put it into a null, and I'm going to put on a Mo extrude. Stick it on one extrusion step. That should be fine. So it's just pushing out the it's just extruding the little triangles. Right, so it's got effectors, which is cool, which is what I want to do. So I'm going to stick a plane effector in there. So I'm going to push it outwards along the normal is on the Z. I'm just getting these nasty little gacky bits. So let's just put the sphere into a connect object, and I'm going to put a thong onto manual just so it looks alright, and then it's got rid of it, just fuses all the sort of single points. So what I want to do is get my Mo extrude, got my plane effector, just want to add a bit of variation in there. So in my fall off, I'm just going to put a random field, maybe make it a noise field as ever, just because it gives more control. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing I'm after, but I want it poking out the little holes. So I'm just going to go back to my previous effector field, which I used to cut away the sphere, and just kind of switch it over, something like that, just so it's kind of, it should, if I've done it right, I'm not sure if I've done it right, hopefully it should be poking through the little holes. And then if I press play, you can see we've got some animation there. I kind of want to make it a bit more dense, make it more interesting, as it's still procedural. That's kind of easy to do. So there we go. Let's pull back some of the geometry. Ooh, something like that. I'm going to make my extrude lower, something like that. I'm going to play with my remapping again, do it as a curve. It offers me the most control. So some of it quite low, a lot of it quite low, and then push out some nice spiky bits. That might be too far, but you know, whatever, it's a tutorial. It's just to give you a gist. And then again, let me just export that. So I just get my connect object and just hit export again. Okay, continuing with a few techniques to make interesting spheres. I'm going to make a sort of hexagonal sphere here, so hexagonal wireframe type thing, and let's see where it goes. So got my sphere, make it an icosahedron. I keep it fairly high, low poly at the moment, just so it's fast. So I'm going to put that in a null, Alt G, and to make hexagons, you can just use a bevel deformer, and then make it proportional, and just put it on 50%. And that just happens to make some quite nice spheres. What I'm going to do to that as well, because it's probably got double edges and all that kind of thing, I'm just going to put it into a connect object and put it onto manual Fong. And so there we've got hexagonal sphere. It's procedural, obviously, so you know, you can make it higher divisions or whatever. What I could do, I'm just going to hide that. I usually have a little null where I just hide things, just turned off, so I can drag copies and make that editable. Select the edges, do edge to spline, and then I can just sweep that. So put it in a sweep. That's my shortcut. And then I use an end side as a profile just because it gives a bit more control. Than using a circle. You don't have to worry about what kind of divisions or whatever. So I know I've got 6 sides there, so it's, you know, a fairly low resolution sweep on there at the moment, but you know, that's often all you need. Even 3 sides, keep the polys as low as you can. That's fine. That'll give me a half decent wireframe, but I want to create something maybe a bit more procedural, where I can have a bit more control, so I'll just pop that there. Take back what I was using. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a more procedural cloner based wireframe effect. So I'm going to get a cylinder, and put it in my cloner, put it to object mode, put my connect object into the object, and then it's on surface at the moment, and my distribution wants to be on edge. I'm going to make my cylinder much, well, I'm going to make it 3 sides just for speed. I'm going to make it much smaller, something like that. And so we're starting to get the effect that we want. I'm going to hide my connect object. Also, a little way of working that often helps is to put your objects in the object manager in order of execution. So the way you want Cinema to execute them. So first you create the geometry, then you clone onto it, and then you do your effectors or whatever. So you'll find with more complex setups, sometimes it does help to do it in that way, and it'll process it a bit more cleanly, and you won't have to refresh or whatever. So that's my cloner with the clone onto the edge. So I'm going to tick scale on edge and just put that to 100%, and now we've got our kind of procedural globe. Then of course we can change the divisions, so make it a lot more dense. We could change the radius, so maybe make that 0.5. That's cool. So that's obviously it being a cloner, then you can do all your clonery things. I could scale all the clones on or do whatever. I'm going to make them multi-instances just because it's quicker and it's always about speed. So what could we do to this? I'm going to make it, say, back to 24. Often on the One Earth, One People, One Love, I create just a bit of jitter and everything, a bit of a stop framey effect just to mimic the connect scans of the quartet. So I'm just going to put in a random effector underneath my sphere, and maybe put it onto noise, put the deformer onto point, just to create a bit of movement. And I'm going to change the noise scale to quite small. And I just want my noise on the Z because that's just pushing out in and out. And there we go. So scales like that, animation speed a bit lower, and then just a subtle bit of movement maybe. So if I hit play, we can just see it going along. It's a little bit slow, but that's fine. You can't really see it doing a lot, but you get the gist of, and it's not doing anything. That's why it's subtle. There you go, you've got your subtle sort of hexagonal sphere. As I said, I could also kind of transition this on, which I did quite a lot in the piece, kind of transitioning on these, that was a lot of a challenge actually. You've got very, very dense geometry. It's about sort of bringing it on gracefully and having it evolving into each other and evolving out of each other. And I did a lot of this kind of thing. So here's a plane effector. I'm just going to stick it on -1 to hide it all, and then just do a linear fall off perhaps, and it can just, we could just move it through and it could grow quite nicely over our sphere. That could be quite a nice effect. So maybe let's do that. I'll animate that. So go back to the start, animate my position. Maybe say it goes on over 25 frames, 24, and then pull it through, something like that. And let's make it a lot denser, so 96 maybe. Oh, that's going to be super dense. Or do literally nothing. That's because it's in my freeze transformation, fortunately. So let's go to my object again. Oh no, it's not. That's strange. So again, this isn't refreshing for some reason, but maybe if we just turn it off and turn it back on again, make sure our order's kind of right, maybe that did the job. That's kind of too dense maybe, so let's go for, I don't know, 64, something like that. I'm going to make my cylinders a little bit thinner, so 0.25, something like that. And then we can just have it animating on perhaps. Let's take it down again. There's something else we could do. Let's just make it 24. Again, because they're just going along the edges. Cloned on the edges. I don't have them going along all the way on the edges. Sort of pull them in a bit, but can create quite a nice look. Just creates a bit more interest. And I'll duplicate that cloner. Let's put a sphere in there. Let's make it an icosahedron. Ooh, that looks quite cool, doesn't it? So getting into weird architectural space. There we go. And make it an icosahedron. Make it as a few divisions as I can. And let's not have it scaled on edges. Let's just have it on the vertexes and create a slightly sort of like atom array look. So something like that. So that's still going to transition on. So have a little bit of movement to make it interesting. It's a bit smaller. They flicked a little bit. I'm just going to take off a line clone because they're kind of round, so we don't get any flickering. So it just sort of transitions on, something like that. Let's make it a 48. Look at that. And there we've got kind of a floopy hexagonal grid thing, maybe that can kind of overlay everything, or you can do whatever, but it's all kind of procedural. But at the moment it's a little bit slow. What we're getting 1.6 frames a second, which isn't enough. So again, I'm just going to output that as an Alembic, and then we can kind of use it and look at stuff closer to real time. Okay, I'm going to create something a little bit different now, not a globe, but just some of the debris that was sort of floating around the outside. So all of this stuff here, just turn that down, there's quite a lot of it floating around, and I'll just show you how to do that in Cinema. So I actually, where are we? I modelled some rocks. They're really low poly rocks. Let's just arrange them. There's an arrange tool, which is very old, but it's kind of good. So let's say like 50. So you can just have a look at stuff. So there's a few big rocks and lots of little ones and some medium ones. So I'm just going to grab all of them, and I'm going to make a circle. Put the axis to XZ, make it bigger, get a cloner, paste in my rocks. Because I want more small rocks, really. I want a lot more small rocks. I'm just going to duplicate those up quite a few times. I'm just holding Command down. And then maybe get some mid rocks as well. Just duplicate those a couple of times. And I want to mix them up a little bit. So I'm not going to iterate them. I'm going to stick them on random. And then I'm going to put it into object mode, and again, correct order of execution, put the cloner underneath the object. I'm going to drop my circle into the object like that, and I'm going to make quite a few, say 100, and I'm going to make the circle much bigger, something like that, and I'm going to select, middle mouse button selects everything underneath. I'm just going to make those smaller like that. I think I'm going to make my big rocks smaller as well, just manually. Just grab them, doesn't matter too much, I'm not being picky. And then to create some of the movement, I'm going to hide the circle for now, don't really need it. So let's put a random effector on there just to move them around a bit, pull them off the spline a bit, and let's just, so quite often I shift select all the three parameters, and then if you hold down Command on a Mac, you can just scroll them all at once, scrub them all at once. If you hold down, right, there we go, yeah, scrub them all at once, right? Something like that. And on the cloner you've got animation controls, which is quite nice. You can move them around the spline, so I'm going to put the rate up. Doesn't need to be that high, let's try 6%. So I'm going to have it a little bit slower than that, you get the idea. I had it really slow in the animation, but just so you can see it. It's doing something a little bit nasty, you're seeing these little jumps here. What you want to do is just tick smooth rotation, and that will fix that. So it's moving around nicely, and you can create some variation of the movement as well. So they're moving at different speeds. Put it up really high. So you can see some are quicker, some are slower. I want lots and lots and lots of kind of space debris. I'm going to make them multi-instances, which is a really nice feature. Stick 500 on there maybe. I'm going to change my spread. I want more of a disc shape, so I'm going to go back into my random effector, just take down a Y, just sort of flatten it like that. Select the two I want to affect, X and Z, and just sort of push it out a little bit more like that. Also, I use this random effector just to randomly rotate them, so just put 360 on all of them, so they're all kind of pointing different ways. I'm going to use the time effector, which is quite a nice little effector. You can use for all sorts of things. Let's drop it in there. Again, maybe let's just put these down below for good practice. I think that's right. And so because I've already rotated my clones, the time effector is just going to keep rotating them 90 degrees every 1 second. So let's just have a look at how that looks. can't see it brilliantly, I'll just put it up a little bit more so you can really see them spinning. So hopefully you can see them tumbling around. So I want to do it more subtly. So 180, you can randomize that as well, how much each one rotates, maybe by randomizing the weight beforehand using another random effector. But that's kind of how I do the space debris, and that's fairly simple. I mean, you can, because they're quite low poly rocks, as you can see. I just sort of hand modelled them. I got some platonics and just pulled them around a bit and just sort of created things just a little bit interesting. And that, you know, it's fairly straightforward, I think, and we can just export that. So again, I won't show you doing it, but I'm just going to export it, and then we can bring that back in and play with it a bit later. We've exported a bunch of sort of alembics, so what do we do with them? Well, this is the kind of fun bit. I'll just grab in the debris, for example. You just get an import dialog, and generally just hit OK. So just hit play, and you just get really nice playback speed. I'm just going to bring in all the elements we had before, so just hold on a minute. So those are all my kind of bits that I've just brought in. We've got the sort of what have we got? We've got a hexagonal mesh, starting to look groovy and just starting to be kind of a little bit complex. What I'll do is I've just got some basic materials, to lump everything together to begin with. So again, I just press play. I've still got, you know, 8-10 frames a second. I can see what's going on. I can get a sense of the animation. I can do previews really quickly. It's just easier to work with. Obviously, if this was all live, it would be very slow. On any software, really, it would be slow, this kind of level of complexity. Let's just put basic reflective material on. Let me put a sky object in there. And I've just got an HDR. See what render. So I'm just on physical render, quite lowish settings. Just hit render. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take down my Phong level because I want nice sharp edges. And we start to get something looking a little bit cool, a little bit sci-fi, a little bit spacey, something like that. So what I tend to do a lot is if we just grab, let's check what we're doing. Yeah, okay. So these are the sort of cutaway spheres that we did first. So what I'll quite often do is I'll again start using the same effect. So I'll put in the extrude, put it as one step. Let's do that for the other one too. And then let's put in a bevel deformer as well. Probably just activate the bevel deformer at render time just to give you some slightly like nice edges, just to sort of bling off of. Oh, is it going to start running a bit slowly? Possibly. Let's have a look. Because it's creating a lot more geometry now, so we wouldn't necessarily want to see the bevel at playback. Oh, we're hanging a little bit slowly. I'm not sure what's going on. Let's just turn off the bevel for now. But you get the general gist. You can start just doing the same kind of things that you do to your geometry anyway. As well, what you can do, so which sphere is this one? So that's our main sphere. Let's just concentrate on that one. We could put in our poly effects, and we can just do exactly the same things. We can kind of scale down all our polys whilst keeping it all live, whilst it's still playing back with the extrude on, or whatever. And obviously you could run your plane effector through that to kind of transition stuff on if we wanted. And I did that quite a lot in the piece, just sort of transition things on. So again, it's using Alembic, but it's still kind of keeping it live. Let's just take all that off. And yeah, it's just nice to use. And you can, let's just go to Wireframe. Yeah, it's just quite a good technique. Obviously, you're baking stuff down, so you haven't got the flexibility of keeping all parametric and adjustable. But you know, there's a nice trade-off, and you can do things fast and play them around. You could clone these. You could have a lot of these spheres kind of in the space at once, and it's just quite a fun way of doing it. I guess there's just one more thing I want to talk about. Just talk very quickly about rendering, which is kind of important, just using kind of float and EXRs, but let's get onto that. So in terms of rendering, I'm just gonna render out a single frame. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make some of the little meteors a little bit glowy and just give them a nice effect in post. So this is my debris. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate it, make it editable. It's a mouthful. I'm just going to start picking a few randomly. Obviously you take a lot more care if you're doing this, but there we go. And then I'm going to hit U and W or select connected. And then I've got material here, which is just got a luminance channel in, and then it's just got 200%. Let's make it 250, and let's give it a tint of yellowy orange or something like that. And then I'm just going to drag it onto my geometry, get a little plus. Automatically creates a set selection on my collapsed geometry, but the cool thing is I can just drag that onto my Alembic and just get rid of my collapsed one. And then let's have a look. Yep, I've got my live kind of ultra bright bits, and there's a good reason for putting it at 200%. If you render in 8-bit or 16-bit, it won't really make a difference. It'll just be a kind of burnt out white, although it will kind of have a stronger effect in the reflections. You get a nice kind of burnt out white effect. But in 8 and 16-bit, it hits a ceiling. When you render a 32-bit in an EXR or something like that, you'll start to get kind of a lot more options in post. I'll just put on that reflective material on. Oop, that's me. Right. What I'm going to do, okay, so let's render an EXR. So I've got it set to EXR automatically. The EXR list is the lowest quality, smallest file size at the bottom, highest quality at the top. I use DWAA. It's a good idea to use 16-bit float and 32-bit here. That just sort of limits your numbers a bit. I won't go into that now. But let me just render this frame and then I'll open it up in After Effects. I've just bought literally that frame. I've rendered, I brought it into After Effects. I've just put a camera lens blur. It's a standard After Effects effect. I'm just going to turn it on, put it on really high. And you see on the image, I'm on 32-bit mode here, in linear sRGB interpolation. And what we're getting is kind of the white, the bits that are 200% luminance, it's still keeping that strength and it's really kind of burning them out. If I use a mask layer, I've just got this mask layer here, really simply done with gradients. So I've got to move myself. Here we go. That just tells what to blur, so it's not blurring in the middle. This obviously looks quite gacky just because I've done it so fast, but it gives you an idea. Let's do a screen grab of that on him, and then let's just stick it on 8-bit to give you an idea of, you see, and then that's in 8-bit, so you really lose that top end. It keeps going in 32-bit float, so it's really useful. And then if you render it as 16-bit floats out of After Effects, out of Cinema, the file sizes are fine, and it's just worth doing, and you'll get much nicer motion blurs when you start doing stuff like this. And an effect I use a lot as well in After Effects as well in this 32-bit is just exposure, and you can really start cranking your values and just kind of making really much more interesting kind of sparkly effects. And I definitely recommend just investigating that. Just try it out. It is really worth it, but you see, that's far too much. It's not looking great, but you get the idea. Anyway, that's the final thing I wanted to mention. Cool, I'm going to go now. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Examples of a similar kind of things. In this project I did at Intro, we had this Jaguar and it was driving past some window reflections. So this is the shot there. It's quite short. And all that is just some images of a city. An image of a car on an alpha, so just a PSD, and then it's all just reflected in a bunch of kind of planes, just kind of a cloned grid, and then with displacement mats put on them to give a kind of warped glass effect. And because I was using this kind of 32-bit workflow, you can see some really nice kind of burnt out sections of the shot, and also you've got if you use physical camera and use depth of field in the shot as opposed to in post, you get the nice bokeh effects, for nice blurriness of the lights, and it can just add some really nice stuff. And the renders on that were pretty quick. It looks like it's some kind of full-on CG thing, but it's not. It's just some images, and that's obviously where you want to be at, where you're doing it quite simply, but it looks nice. It looks expensive. This is a corporate video I did. You've just got this kind of grid-like pattern. It's called an ND tree, but it's just kind of a subdivided up grid, and I've just tilted it a bit, and these shapes kind of fly off of it. It falls away, and then we've kind of got these kind of shards which are meant to be exchanging information, and this big grid thing was done in Houdini, and so are these shapes, and then I just brought it into Cinema and rendered it in Corona render, which is probably not the most popular render at the moment. So we can have a quick look at that one. There we go. Here we go. So again, I've just got a bunch of nulls with each little section in. So these little, I'll just step out of my camera. Hopefully I didn't move the camera. I think I did, but I won't worry. So I only made one of these, or I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 of them just for variation, and duplicated. If you look here, they're called Pew Pew. Duplicated the Alembic, and then it's also got an Alembic curve or spline coming out of it as well. If I just scrub a little bit, you can see them shooting across. So I brought in the Alembic spline, and then I've just swept it, and it's got overbright colours on it, so you get a nice glow. And I've just moved these around a little bit, and it's great because it's got start of animation offset, so you can choose when it starts, so you can set up all your different Alembic instances, or just your Alembics in different places, keep copying and pasting them, offsetting the time, offset the position, offset whatever you want, and create complexity that way. And I've used instances for these as well, so I've just sort of dropped a few of them around, and it's pretty lightweight. I mean, you can see, just play it, 7 frames a second, that's fine. You can see what you're doing, you can get a sense of it. Have I got a start? Let's have a look at all these. BG. Oh yeah, so we've got a background as well here. So do we want that one? Yeah, this is just for background. Again, it's just another kind of Alembic I brought through. And then I could just, because it's baked as an Alembic, I could just push it around a little bit and move my camera around and get the shards flying kind of close to it, and just kind of see what I want to do. You've got a background element here. But you've got 2 background elements. What's this? I don't know what that is. I haven't been in this. Floating greeble. So this is just like a greebly thing that I fly through, and again I've just put a Mo extrude onto it just to give it a bit of depth, so the geometry can be lightweight or heavyweight depending where I'm at. Again, in this background, I've kind of just got the same thing. It's just literally, actually maybe it's this one here. I've got a background plate, it's beveled, it's just got a random effector on it just to mix it up a little bit and to create some interest. And again, it's just the same kind of thing I was doing for the Kronos Quartet. Again, it's good if let's check I've got that turned on. So this is the Alembic I brought in for Houdini, and then it's good because you can bring in extra information if you can send it out of Cinema and back in again, or out of whatever program you're using. But I've got a point color on here, or a vertex color tag, so I can drag that tag into a shader. If you just put a vertex map, vertex effect shader effect in your shader slots, you can bring in all that information. I think I added that to the reflectivity, so some of them were more or less reflective. I think I jiggled up the UVs for everything, so I put on a general texture, but I wanted it slightly different on each little plane, so I just jiggled it up a bit, and that's that one. And then let's look at the quick times again. So this is a Messiaen piece for a composer called Olivier Messiaen I did, and it's got quite a lot of geometry. It's got quite a lot going on. It's quite a complex look. But again, the frame time is rendering is super quick because it's just like a grayscale diffuse render with a little bit of ambient occlusion and a cell render. And I put a depth pass on the cell render just to cut it out when it gets very small. I still use the cell render. It's just the oldest effect, but I like it. You've got these cicadas flying around that were done in X particles, and then you've got all these crystals, and again these are all kind of just alembics mainly. I kind of made them out of cloners and wherever and just brought them in and then just offset the timing. Let's have a look at that quickly. Close that one. So this is the Messiaen thing. You see again it plays alright in the viewport. I've got some stuff turned off. Look, Clockwork Toys. They've got this kind of, it's a lot of golden ratio stuff, and as you can see I kind of pull through it all, and then it's got this great big, let me see if I can remember right, yeah, is it that? Yeah. So it's got this kind of swarm of cicadas that fly out of this great big time clock. And just solo the cicadas, which are just sort of insects, like grass, like locusts or something. If you hold down J, you can just scrub in the viewport, which is quite useful. But so they were done. Here they are coming out of the clock. These were done in X particles, and I wanted them to have geometry and to be kind of aligned, so they're kind of really a low poly little kind of insect thing. So as I said, I used a generator in X particles, and then just exported them as an Alembic, brought them back in, so I can retime them a bit if I need to, and then I've got playback of 6, 7, 8 frames a second, which is pretty good because they're quite complex. They're flying around, they're doing, some cool flocking stuff. I think it's just the X particles flocking modifier, but it's nice and it does what I want it to do. So that's the Maxon one. Where are we? So that's that's more or less it. I mean, as I say, you can bring in curves. This is something I did for 59 Productions. You've got this kind of person made of almost kind of shards of energy, but they're just little splines basically that I brought in, and if you just render with hair, it's so quick. I love using hair just to render these things. And you've got the violin and you've got all these kind of musical shapes. It's quite a tricky brief. It was to kind of, I can't even remember what it was for. When you reach the end of human imagination beyond the quantum, something like that. But again, do your heavy lifting in one step, do all the sims, and then bring it in and play with it in Alembic. That's the general gist of what I'm saying. Just finally, to sum up, I just went through a bunch of kind of modelling techniques using the bevel to do things like create nice hexagons out of triangle meshes, cloning onto splines, just different ways of doing that, and then doing kind of whatever setups you're going to do, using fields to cut things out, or it can be anything. Then export as an Alembic, then bring it in, and then you can use your poly effects, you can use your Mo extrude, you can use the kind of procedural bevel on it, and just all those kind of things. You can bring stuff on and off with your effectors, just your plain effectors, and then it's about also as well looking at the sort of 32-bit float mode, which is, it's not that complex, but it's worth just starting to render in EXR in that mode if you want to have nice glowy kind of burnt out things and nice effects in kind of depth of field and bokeh and all those things, and it's just worth playing with. It can bring an extra kind of element to what you're doing. If you're animating really fast moving little sparks, it can make them really bright and glowy, and it can just add more drama to your images and so on. And finally, just to promote myself, so for me, my website is simonfarussell.com, and I've been doing some sort of arty stuff. So I've been doing some plotter drawings, which is kind of plotting sound waves and stuff. I'm at simonrussell.art. And my Twitter's Simon F.A. Russell, and so is my Instagram. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun, and if you've got any questions, give me a shout or just say hello. All right. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.